You know, with Dvorak, for me, it's sort of like the Bach suites. I look at it, I'm not religious at all. But, you know, the Bible or the Old Testimony, whatever you want to call it, or believe it or not, it's a story that we all know, like the story of Adam and Eve, or, you know, Moses or Abraham, all this. We all know those stories, and we all grew up somehow learning it. The beauty of those stories is that in every different part, let's say, chapter in your life, you go back to them and you see them differently. And for me, the Dvorak concerto and the Bach suites are the same. Something that you learn when you're, let's say, the first time when you're 17, and you struggle with it, and you learn the notes, and you feel, wow, I achieved my first goal as a cellist, to play Dvorak. Then you play, if you're lucky, you also play it with orchestra. Then you, in 5 years, you play it again, because you have auditions. And then you get a job and you start teaching it. And then if you're really lucky, you start playing it with orchestra, and maybe you even make a recording. Each time you come back to it, for me it's on a daily basis, because I teach it and play it. Every single time I look at it from a different angle, because I'm a different person. And it's so beautiful to do that. So I'm saying it because whatever I will tell you today will probably be contradicted by so many other cellists, including you and your teachers. And the beauty of it is that it's a journey that you're taking with this piece. And it's a beautiful journey, and it will change your perspective of the piece really on a daily basis. So, having said that, before we go into details, I'm just curious to know, because as you know from yesterday, from our lessons, I want to know what kind of story or imagination you have when you play it. And for me, it's like, I always think, when I think of imagination, do you know the story of Mowgli?
Yeah.
The jungle story?
Yeah.
So, you know, if I drop you in the Amazon in Brazil, you probably, or me, I would probably die after 2 days, because I have no instincts, I have no knowledge of the jungle. Same with music. In order to have imagination, we need to have knowledge. The more knowledge you have of the piece, the more it will ignite your imagination. So I'm just curious to know, do you know where he was when he wrote this piece?
I think he was in the United States.
Where in the United States?
I don't know.
What I'm trying to do is to somehow have you more curious, not just, okay, my teacher gave me this finger, this. Before we start this, let's set up a story. So we are at the end of the 19th century. Dvorak lives in New York. Have you ever seen photos, because there were photos that time, of New York, like black and white photos of New York, of Manhattan? Like, let's say Dvorak wake up in the morning in his apartment in Manhattan, he looks outside, what does he see? Does he see horses? Does he see cars? Do you have any idea how New York, so maybe this will help your imagination. What does he hear? Does he hear car honking, or does he hear horses? Do you know who was his best friend in New York? This is actually getting very close to what you need to know. Victor Herbert.
Okay.
Have you heard of Victor Herbert?
Yeah.
Who was he?
I think he was a conductor.
Was a conductor, great. What else was he?
A cellist.
Cellist.
I really.
Very good cellist.
Okay.
And also a very good composer. Have you heard of John Williams?
Yes.
Yeah, all the movies, Spielberg. Victor Herbert was a John Williams of the 19th century. I mean, he was a very wealthy composer, writing operettas mainly. His wife was a singer, prima donna, singing in Broadway. He was the first cellist of Metropolitan Orchestra, and then later, you're right, he was the first conductor of the Pittsburgh Symphony. But he was mainly a great composer of popular music. In fact, if you walk in Central Park, there are a few sculptures of very important figure of New York, and he's one of them. You see often the sculpture of Victor Herbert in New York. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because when Dvorak sat down to write the Dvorak concerto, which we all play and love and deal with it every day, he was influenced by Victor Herbert's cello concerto. That's what made him decide. You know, these days, when I was your age, if my teacher would embarrass me like this, he said, go to the library and do it. Now, you go to Google. Tak, 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 tak. You know what I do in lessons? We can't do it here. We don't have our iPhone. I tell the student, okay, now, start counting. I'm going to look for you for these answers. And I put it in Google. 20 seconds. 20 seconds. Every question I ask you now, you could answer in 20 seconds. It's unbelievable. And yet, students practice this piece 4 hours a day for a whole year, or they spend their whole life with it. And then you ask them, who influenced Dvorak to write this piece? I don't know. You know? So maybe this will help you. But just to give you an idea, Schumann was the one who wrote first the big concerto in 1850s. He never heard it when he was alive because it was too weird. Nobody wanted to play it. The premiere was just when he died, in the early 60s, the premiere was. But the main concertos, then after Schumann came Lalo, Saint-Saëns, some people play Haydn, but the main music people heard of cello was Popper. And they heard Popper play it, nobody else could play it. So Dvorak had no idea what are the possibilities of the cello. And then he meets Victor Herbert, who was a great cellist. And Victor Herbert writes his second concerto. And Dvorak has his buddy, you know, they're really good friends. He says, hey, Dvorak, you know, I'm envisioning it in New York. You know, it's black and white, but it's a really cool, it's like Vienna of 100 years early. Everybody wants to be in New York. And he tells him, hey, Dvorak, would you like to come and hear the premiere? And he comes, oh, sure, I'll hear you, know, you're my friend. Then he hears this. This is the beginning of Herbert. That's how the concerto starts. Dam, papi, tremolo, dam. And here's oh my God. And then the allegro. Yeah, unbelievable concerto. Then comes the second movement, which I think, honestly, is the most beautiful slow movement we have in our repertoire. So you must know it. And he's writing this movement to his wife, who was a great singer of the time. And it's the most beautiful. Too bad we don't have the harmony because it's gorgeous. Such a love song. Yeah, I had to finish the phrase. And Dvorak, now there are no CDs. So Dvorak heard of this Popper, maybe that, you know, he's like sort of Paganini of the cello, but maybe he heard it maybe once or twice. Mm-hmm. And then he comes and he hears Herbert playing this. And he says, what? The cello can do, and he goes and he writes a concerto. Mm-hmm. And you know that Brahms heard the Dvorak concerto, and he said, wow, if I knew that it's possible. So they had to hear it live in order to understand that it's possible. And now, this is why Dvorak wanted to write a concerto. But now there's an emotional reason for a lot of the themes in this piece. Do you know anything about it, about the sister of his wife?
She died when he was writing the second movement. And
but do you know what was his relationship to her?
He was in love with her.
Yeah, he was in love. And do you know that she was sick when he started to write it, and he went back home to see her. And he wrote this very beautiful, happy ending to the piece, which he changed when he came there and he realized she's dead. Now you have, again, you have to go back to that time. Your generation is used to text and email and, you know, oh, somebody's sick, okay, I'll be on the next flight. For him, it was a letter. You know, it took a few weeks to get to him, and he understood that she's sick. He said, oh my God, I have to go home. But he's writing this concerto. He says, I'll write this ending because I'm going to see her, and I'm in love with her, not with my wife. Can you imagine? I mean, you're not married, but if you will be, you will understand how tragic it is. And then it takes him a few weeks to get there. During the time she dies, he has no idea. I mean, he's in his imagination. Yeah. So then he gets there. He opened. I can imagine. You know, he runs to the apartment. He opens the door, and oh, she just died. You know, 2 weeks ago. And then he realized, you know, I couldn't even say goodbye to the one woman I loved. And then he writes this end of the piece. I mean, that puts you in completely different mindset. So that was the knowledge that you need to have before you start to ignite your imagination with a story. Have you ever lived outside of your country?
Not lived, just traveled. But...
Okay, so, but you are going to school, you told me, to a different country. So you will see what it means to miss home. You will have these periods where you miss home, the smell of the food, yeah, like your mother's soup, or, you know, that we all have it. It doesn't matter what century you live. Some of the themes here, we will talk about it. If you try to imagine this feeling that you miss home, you are in one place, a very exciting place, but you miss home. This feeling when you start the second theme, for instance, it's not just piano, or okay, I'll do it in one bow, or I'll do this, or I'll change the vibrato. No, first of all, what kind of mindset do I have when I play it? Okay? So, now you heard the beginning of Herbert, this... You know this piece, you know this majestic, heroic beginning. You're in New York, which is the most exciting city in the world. You heard this thing, and now you say, okay, now is my turn to write something. So let's try to have this in mind and start the piece. Okay?
Okay.